Today I want to take a few minutes and talk about the topic of compensation and salaries. Now, most times when teachers are hired, they're given a contract and told this is where you fit on the salary scale. And they accept it because they're glad to have the job, never really asking what it means. Now, when you're the head of the school, it's a little bit different game. You need to have a clear understanding of what your compensation package represents in relation to the school's mission and in relationship to the vision that you have for the school. Now, when you look at that salary scale, it should start with the concept of the school's compensation philosophy. Now, unfortunately, a lot of schools don't have this. They've just decided someone started a salary scale long ago and we'll just keep it going until somebody tells us otherwise. But if you're going to be the leader that you want to be, and you want to make sure that those who are working with you and for you are energized and also able to take care of their families, you need to have a clearly delineated compensation philosophy. Now, I'd like to read you one particular compensation philosophy that I designed. It was designed with other administrators in the school, a select group of faculty, a few staff members, and a few members of my board of directors. After countless meetings and discussions, this is the compensation philosophy that we as a group developed. It says, in accordance with the gospel message and the social teachings of our church, we espouse the concept of a just, fair, and reasonable compensation for all teachers and staff. In keeping with this philosophy, the following principles apply. Compensation for all teachers and staff will enable them to provide for the needs of their own lives and those of their families. Compensation for all teachers and staff will enable them to bring sufficient focus and energy to their work, maintain an appropriate professional presence for their assignments, and cultivate proficiency in their fields to best further the mission of the school. Compensation scales are based on internal equity between jobs determined by assessing both the relative responsibility of the positions and pay data from similar jobs in comparable school environments, as well as preparation and training for the position, responsibility, seniority, and accountability. Compensation represents both tangible and intangible aspects. The school recognizes all benefits, working conditions, worksite environment, and direct pay are important elements in the total compensation of teachers and staff. External equity is an important factor in the school's ability to recruit and retain personnel. Performance is appraised and excellence encouraged and rewarded. Compensation is based on the financial ability of the school to pay its teachers and staff a just wage. Compensation of teachers and staff, although a very important component of the school's operation, it is one of several costs associated with the functioning of the school. Accordingly, compensation may necessarily be below market value due to a concern for the careful stewardship of the resources available to the school. Now that sounds like a lot of words, but let's think about it for a second. It talks about a just wage. It talks about making sure that the employees of the school are able to take care of their own lives as well as their families. It talks about making sure that the salary scale reflects not just what other schools are doing, but also the individual's training. What does that mean? That means that if you come out of college with a bachelor's degree and you're certified as a teacher, you'll start on a particular pay scale. If you get a master's degree, you'll be compensated because you have additional training. If you get a doctorate, there's additional compensation because you have gone out to become an even stronger professional. It also says that it takes into account the fact that a teacher that's just out of college and a person that's been on your staff for 25 or 30 years should be compensated differently. It also says that your salary scale and your compensation package is designed to retain your teachers, make sure that the good teachers stay, and also to make sure that when someone leaves and you need to fill a position, that you're able to attract quality personnel. In that particular compensation philosophy, it also clearly states the school does not have unlimited resources. And as a result, you might not be able to pay the top dollar that perhaps a local public school or even a well-endowed private school might have. But it does say your goal is to make sure that you have a package that is reflective of the teachers and their dedication and the quality and the professionalism that you expect. Now, as you look at salary scales and you're comparing your school with other schools, oftentimes in Catholic schools you're finding that they're a little bit lower. Now, some schools in their compensation philosophy design it in such a way that it's in sync with their 5-year plan. It says that we will attempt by the end of 5-year period to be at 80% of the local public school or 75%. What that also does is tell your teachers that you are working to ensure that they are not lost in the shuffle, that you're considering their needs as well as the programmatic needs and the facilities needs in your school. Now, if you look at salary scales from public schools as well as Catholic schools and other private schools, one of the things that you'll find is that there's a bump oftentimes. For instance, if you look at a lot of salary scales after year 3 or 4, there seems to be a jump in the salaries. Why is that? Because in many schools you have the concept of tenure, which means that you have been evaluated and the school feels that you are worth the investment. So in order to keep you, they will go ahead and make sure that you have the correct compensation. Now, if you look at some salary scales, the longer you are there, the less the percentage of increase. Now again, let me step back a second. How's the salary scale set up? It's set up from the standpoint of what we call steps. Now, in some cases, a step might be 1%, or it might be 2%. But between step 1 and step 2, and step 2 and step 3, and all the way down the line, there is a percentage of increase. What does that mean? Well, if you're on step 1 of a bachelor's, it means that you're starting off, and as a result, you are a first-year teacher. If you're there with a bachelor's degree and you're at step 10, it means that you've been at that school for 10 years. Now, some schools alter that and will assign a teacher that's come in slightly more and say that, well, you have 2 years experience, so we're going to go ahead and start you off on step 3. But as you go through the steps, as many of you find out as you look at salary scales, they kind of cap, perhaps after year 20 or 23 years or 25 years. What does that mean? Well, that's an interesting point, because in some schools it means that you no longer get a step increase. It means that if there is not additional compensation beyond that, your salary will stay the same for as long as you're there. Now, in most cases, a school will say we're giving a step plus 1 or 2%. In the old days, when our schools were giving much larger salaries, I've seen steps be as high as step plus 5, 6, 7%. What does that translate into? That translates into as much as a 9 or 10% increase. Today's world's a little bit different. Most times you'll hear a step plus 1%. If you're lucky, step plus 2%. Now, it's important also, as you look at your budget down the road, that you consider what's the compensation. What do you anticipate the compensation? So if everyone moves on your scale up 1, they'll move up the step, and then what percentage will you give them? It's an important factor to consider, because it also affects not just the compensation to the teacher, but it also affects what the school will need to pay in other benefits, such as Social Security and Medicare taxes. So as you look at salaries, take a look at the whole picture. Understand why your teachers are receiving the salary that they do. Many cases, schools do not have a similar scale for support staff or administrators. From a professional standpoint, there should be. There should be standards, because if everyone understands what their compensation is in comparison to other settings, there's a much greater chance that, number one, you will hire and then ultimately retain quality people in your school. Again, I hope these thoughts on salary and compensation give you a little bit different perspective. Again, as in everything, it starts with the mission and the vision of the school. What do you want your school to be? And how do you want your salaries and other compensation packages that you develop for your faculty and staff to reflect the quality of your school and the quality of the most important resource that you have, the human resource in your school? I hope these thoughts help. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Have a good day. Thanks.